Hello everybody, welcome to Coding with Tom. Today we're going to be creating custom buttons for different inputs that will have different behaviors and we'll have animations even. We will also be creating custom alerts like a banner that slides from the top or a toast message that shows from the bottom. Both of these are timed or can be dismissed by the user. We're going to be using a previous project that we had worked on, the animation showcase. We're going to rename it to showcase since now we're going to be showcasing not only animation, but other types of views. Our content view will now be a tab view. We're going to separate the animatable inputs that we have created in a previous video. And the next step that we're going to create will be custom buttons. Our first view will be a capsule button. This will be a normal button that will have some custom behavior and it will have the shape of a pill. We'll start with a normal button. Let's give it a colored background and some padding so it's a little bit bigger. We'll also make the font bigger. To have that pill shape, we could deal with corner radius, but here it's easier. We just add a clip shape with a capsule shape. But now what happens if I want to have different colors for the background and for the foreground color? Also, I want them to change when the button is pressed. Here we can now specify color for button state, like we did in UIKit. So for that, we're gonna resort to button style. So now we have our own button style. To conform to this protocol, we just have to implement make body. Here we have our configuration, which has the label. So that's the button, the view of the button. And from that we start. So it's just like a view modifier. We're going to be adding here our background color and the clip shape that we used above. Let's refresh the preview. And here we have our button. Now notice that we still do not know if the configuration is pressed or not. And that's because we used the wrong protocol here. We do not want the primitive button style. We want button style. And now in the background modifier, we can use the isPressed from the configuration parameter to change the color. In the preview, you can see that when we press the button, it changes to white. And let's do the same for foreground color. Let's press and notice how the foreground and the background color change when we are pressing. Let's move on now to the next button. Now we're going to create a circular button where we will be displaying just an image, no text. We'll call that the image button. Again, let's move from a normal button with an image. We're using an SF symbol here. Let's add a shadow first. Now to give that circular image, we could use clip shape, but instead we're going to use a background view. This time a circle. We're also going to give some padding to the image. And let's add a fill color to the circle. Notice that the shadow was applying to both the image and the circle, so we move the modifier inside the background modifier. And here we have our button. Now we do not only want the ability to display SF symbols in the button, we also want to display images from our assets catalog. So let's do some changes. First, we'll add this Anvil image that I'm bringing from the Castles app. And now let's modify our image button to also display image named assets. The only thing we have to do here is by using the isTemplate flag, we just decide if we initialize an image view from a system name or from an image name. And let's display in the preview our two types of buttons. So one will be with the SF symbol, and the other one will use our Anvil. Now here in the preview, everything seems to be working, but if you are supporting iOS 13, let's run on the simulator and see what happens. Now let's run the app and notice the difference between the preview and our simulator. The Anvil, it's color blue instead of the image appearing like it should. It's tinting it. This only happens in iOS 13, by the way. iOS 14 doesn't have this side effect. Let's run it. And as you can see here, the Anvil does appear as an image. To fix this, we just need to make sure that the image is being rendered as it should. So when the image is an SF symbol, we render with template mode. When it's an image, we render with original. And as you can see right now, in iOS 13, we now have our Anvil image. Let's now proceed to create another button. This one will shake when it's disabled and it's pressed. So if the user presses the button when it's in a disabled state, it'll just shake to indicate the user that nothing will be executed. If it's enabled, it will just carry out the action that it was assigned. For this one, we're just going to worry about the animation of shaking. So since we're not going to do a different appearance, we're going to use a capsule button as a base. So when the button is pressed, if it is enabled, we perform the action. If not, we use this toggle, which we're going to use to animate the shaking. We could use a custom geometry effect to simulate the shaking. What we're going to do this time instead is use the offset modifier, which will displace the button, and we'll use a spring animation, which with the damping will cause a shaking effect. After some playing around, we have landed with the values that we want. So for our response and damping fraction, let's add small values. This will not affect our button, and you will see that now we are having a little displacement. What we need to do is move the damping fraction to 0. However, if we do this, it will affect also the normal state. So for that, we're gonna add a linear animation with duration 0 when it's not toggle. Also, because we don't want the button to be shaking forever with the damping fraction 0, when we toggle it on, we will add an action to 5.5 seconds later, we will toggle the state back to false. As you can see in the preview, we get our effect. All that's left is adding this button to our showcase and moving on to our alerts. Okay, let's start with our banner view. It will be the first alert that we will be displaying, and we will display it from the top. The view of the banner is going to be really simple. It's just a filled rectangle and a text in a C stack. Now we don't want each view to be dealing with the complexity of presenting this banner. So we will create a modifier, just like with sheet and alert, that other views can implement when they want to display a banner. For our banner modifier, we're just adding a binding variable. If we are showing it, then we display the banner. If not, then we just display the content. And there we have it in the preview. Let's add it to the showcase, to the third tab. And let's add a button that we will handle a state. Because we're going to be doing more complex things, we're going to create a separate view for this. I'll also prepare the whole view with spacers. This will make our button be centered. Now let's try tapping. Oh, added the modifier to the wrong view. Set it to the V stack, and we have our top banner. Now, from the preview, you may have noticed that the banners just appear and disappear. We need to add a transition. Let's add a slight transition and see how it looks. Still not displaying. We're missing the with animation toggle. Closure, I mean. And now our banner is sliding. Now notice that it was animated when it was transitioning out. When it's transitioning in, it wasn't. This is due to C-stack. As we saw in a previous video, to have our transition animate, we need to handle ourselves the C index for every view in the C-stack. We also changed the transition from slide to move, and the edge is from the top. Let's try running this. Let's go to our alerts. And as you can see, when we tap, we have our sliding and slide out transition. For the new iPhones, as you saw, the banner was not ignoring the safe area. This is not desirable since we want the banner to color the status bar. We could use the ignore safe area modifier, but that's only supported for iOS 14. So for that, we're gonna use the previous modifier, which is edges ignore safe area. Now we are coloring the status bar. Let's also add some padding so that the message doesn't get clipped by the top. Let's try running this in a small device as well. Looks well. And notice one thing, when we are tapping, we cannot dismiss this banner. We need to tap the button again to toggle it off. Let's first add a drag gesture so that when the user swipes or drags the banner up, we will dismiss it. Let's run it. And now we can drag the view up and the banner is dismissed. Now the other behavior we want to add is for the banner to dismiss itself. We don't want it to stay there until the user does something. The user can dismiss it before. If not, then we'll just display it for a specific amount of time and the banner will dismiss itself. For that, we will be creating a separate class to handle this since we're going to use it in more than one view, and it's going to be the dismissible view model. So basically what this class is responsible for is keeping the reference to the flag that is showing the banner. It will set a timer to return the value of the flag to false. We're going to trigger this timer when the variable value is set with true. Now to add this view model to our modifier, instead of using the is showing that is given to the modifier, we're going to be using the one that we're observing in the dismissible view model. Since we're observing the dismissible view model, we can catch when the flag is changing. And for that, we need to revert the change that we did. The boolean that we're going to be passed, it's going to be a binding bool. That way, when the dismissible changes value, we update the binding bool. Let's try now. Stop our button, and 1 second later, our banner is dismissed. We could also just dismiss it with the gesture. Now for a little bit of cleanup, notice that if we dismiss the banner with a gesture, we're not gonna need the timer anymore. So if each showing is switched to false, we will invalidate the timer. Now I want to be a little bit more clear with the buttons. So I'm gonna go to the capsule button and let's add a title. It will be optional. We'll have the default value of large button so that we can distinguish them in our alert view. Now let's create another button to toggle the state, but this time to show the toast. Our toast view will also be a message. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be reusing the dismissible view model. Instead of having a gesture to dismiss, this toast will have an image button with an arrow down that when the user presses will dismiss the toast. Just like we did for the banner, we're going to use a view modifier to show the toast in different views. We're going to be basically using the same. We're going to copy the implementation for the message, the binding boolean, and the dismissible view model. The difference here is that we'll be showing the toast from the bottom and we won't add a drag gesture. Before moving on, let's add the modifier to our alerts view. And just like we had to deal with the safe area and the padding, let's do that for the toast. On our toast, we were missing the onReceive that we were doing on the banner. So we can update the binding boolean that was passed to us. And let's try it. See, we show the toast. We show that an arrow is dismissed. If we don't do anything, it dismisses by itself after 2 seconds. Same for our banner. And that was all for today. Doing custom views like buttons animating them, and creating custom styles has been supported in SwiftUI since the beginning. Same goes for the transitions of different views. We created two alerts very easily. Hope you liked it. Bye.